welcome His Excellency, the President of Nigeria, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari. Another round of applause. Let's do it. We are highly favored to have him here. Thank you very much. Please, can we have our seats? Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Your Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, Your Excellencies, in your different ranks and files, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Your Excellencies, Commissioners here present, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. On behalf of Save the Children and other partners, we welcome you to this high-level breakfast dialogue on Stop the War on Children Dividend of Silencing the Guns. This high-level dialogue is held after the Continental Conference on CAAC organized by Save the Children and partners in October 2019, which saw a strong representation by children affected by armed conflicts, among whom is Miriam, who is seated here with us. This high-level dialogue will therefore seek to build on the outcomes of that conference, including a strong call to action that children presented on that occasion. In addition, this high-level dialogue is an opportunity for us to remind ourselves as African leaders of our commitments to protect children affected by armed conflict, especially as African Union member states deliberate on the theme of the year, Silencing the Guns. If we have to achieve the African Union Agenda 2063, that vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own competent and skilled citizens, able to play in the global arena, we need to silence the guns. Whether these guns are physical, psychological, emotional, economical, social, they need to be silenced so that we can actually have a peaceful Africa that each and every one of us can be proud of. Finally, this dialogue is a unique opportunity to showcase good practices from African Union member states on the protection of children affected by armed conflict and to galvanize commitment and action to prevent, protect, and address the 6 grave violations against children in situations of armed conflicts. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I will quickly move to the people, our distinguished and esteemed guests on the podium. I would like to introduce Miss Mariam Aldinabango. Mariam, did I try to pronounce your surname? Aldinabango, am I right? Thank you. Who is a child from Mali, and she is the president of the Stop the War on Children Campaign Committee in Mali. Miriam, you have the floor because you are going to speak for the voices of children on the topic on grave violations on children. Then we also have, I'm not going to introduce our big guest now. We also have the representative of His Excellency Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, on the left hand of our distinguished President. Then we also have Miss Virginia Gamba, who is a special representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, a global perspective on prevention, protection, and accountability on the 6 grave violations against children. Then, next to Mariam, we have Mr. Steve Miller, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Save the Children South Africa, Stop the War on Children Campaign 2020 report. So these are going to be our distinguished speakers. So I will start by calling Mariam to be the first to speak. Anywhere you want, either you sit where you are or you come right here.
Thank you very much. Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République du Nigeria, honorables invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, en grade et qualité, bonjour. Je réponds à l'identité de Adjana Bango Mariam, je viens du Mali. Je suis ancienne présidente du Parlement des enfants du Mali et actuelle présidente du comité de pilotage de la campagne Stop à la guerre contre les enfants. Beaucoup vont se demander qu'est-ce que le Parlement des enfants. Le Parlement des enfants est une tribune de libre expression de tous les enfants du Mali qui a pour but d'assister les pouvoirs publics et privés pour la mise en œuvre de son plan d'action biennal sur le plan de la survie, de la protection, du développement et de la participation de l'enfant. Elle a pour mission de promouvoir et défendre les droits de chaque enfant à travers des plaidoyers et sensibilisations. C'est avec une grande émotion partagée entre tristesse et joie que je prends aujourd'hui la parole au nom de tous les enfants de l'Afrique pour vous adresser à vous, chers leaders, qui œuvrent chaque jour pour permettre aux enfants de jouir pleinement de leurs droits, mais tout en vous priant de changer vos grades contre celles des pères et mères de tous les enfants de l'Afrique, juste pour quelques minutes. C'est au Parlement des enfants que j'ai énormément appris sur les questions d'enfance. À travers mes nombreuses activités, j'ai acquis des connaissances en violence basée sur le genre, les mutilations génitales féminines, le mariage d'enfants. À travers mes activités, j'ai remarqué en Afrique, et notamment au Mali, d'où je viens, que les enfants n'ont toujours pas droit à la protection et à l'éducation. Or, ceux-ci sont les droits fondamentaux pour chaque enfant et la Convention relative aux droits de l'enfant ainsi que la Charte africaine pour le bien-être de l'enfant protègent ces droits. Je suis là aujourd'hui pour vous parler des défis et opportunités de la protection des enfants ainsi que de leur éducation, car je rêve d'une Afrique où chaque enfant aura droit à une éducation de qualité. Je rêve d'une Afrique où chaque enfant aura droit aux soins de santé. Je rêve d'une Afrique où chaque enfant puisse avoir accès à un espace de distraction. Quand j'étais plus petite, je voyais à la télé des enfants affamés, effrayés quelquefois, qu'ils étaient là, sans abri, loin de mon pays, loin de mon continent. J'imaginais ceci. Un pays, un continent que je chéris du plus profond de mon être et que j'ai compris et que j'ai promis qu'il sera le plus aimé, le plus envieux du monde. Mon existence sera menacée dans ce continent. Menacée par cette ombre voilée, voilée de noir, qui n'amène que tristesse, peine et désarroi dans nos vies depuis des années. Vous me direz que c'est la mort. Non, il s'agit de la guerre. Actuellement en Afrique, plus de 55 000 crimes contre les enfants commis dans les zones de conflit en 5 ans. Et plus de 55 882 violations graves ont été commises contre des enfants dans les zones de conflit en Afrique entre 2014 et 2018, selon une nouvelle recherche de Save the Children. Cela comprend les enfants tués, mutilés ou agressés sexuellement, l'enlèvement des enfants, la fermeture de milliers d'écoles et d'hôpitaux, le recrutement des enfants dans les groupes armés et le non-accès à l'aide humanitaire. Des milliers d'enfants vivent avec le traumatisme d'avoir vu des choses qu'aucun enfant ne devrait jamais voir, être témoin d'horribles actes de violence, de perte de vie humaine. Et ceci me rappelle l'histoire de la petite Fanta que j'ai rencontrée au Mali sur un site déplacé qui m'a raconté son histoire. Elle me dit ceci: quand j'étais dans mon village natal, tout allait bien, on cultivait, on allait à l'école en paix, on avait beaucoup de bœufs, jusqu'au jour où on a été alerté que des bandits armés allaient venir dans notre village. Et ce jour, j'avais beaucoup peur, j'étais effrayée. Et quand on a essayé de s'échapper, arrivé à un moment, on a rencontré des bandits armés et j'ai vu mon père se faire tuer. Mon père a été égorgé par des bandits armés. J'ai failli mourir également, mais heureusement que ma mère était là, mes frères étaient là pour m'aider. Ensemble, on s'est échappés. Et actuellement, la petite Fanta, âgée de 10 ans, se trouve à Bamako. Elle se trouve à Bamako sur un camp de sites de déplacés. La petite Fanta ne va pas à l'école. Elle n'a pas d'abri. Elle n'a pas accès aux soins médicaux. Elle n'a même pas accès à l'eau potable. Combien d'enfants actuellement en Afrique sont dans la même situation que la petite Fanta? Est-ce que vous imaginez sa peine? Est-ce que son avenir est garanti? Cette question, je la pose à vous, leaders, qui êtes là aujourd'hui. Mesdames et messieurs, chers membres de l'Union africaine, chers représentants des Nations Unies, permettez-moi de vous rappeler que vous vous êtes engagés devant l'Afrique et le monde entier à œuvrer pour le retour de la paix. De ce fait, il vous incombe de veiller au respect de cet engagement. Comme on le dit, les enfants sont l'avenir d'un pays. Les enfants sont l'avenir de l'Afrique. Les enfants sont l'avenir du monde. Et si on ne prépare pas leur avenir, est-ce qu'il y aura une Afrique? Est-ce que le monde va exister? Même si un monde existera, est-ce que ce sera un monde dont on rêve chacun? Je formule par la même occasion la volonté des enfants d'Afrique d'être associés dans le processus de prise de décision, la protection de nos espaces d'apprentissage et de loisirs, pour terminer le respect des normes et principes définis par le droit international. Mesdames et messieurs, avec votre permission, je voudrais qu'on observe une minute de silence en hommage de tous ces enfants ayant perdu la vie lors des armées. Merci de votre engagement pour l'Afrique, mais nous souhaitons que vous fournissiez, que vous fassiez mieux, que vous fassiez plus pour sauver les enfants de l'Afrique, pour que les enfants de l'Afrique soient éduqués. Je prie Dieu de faire de l'Afrique un continent de paix et de prospérité pour le bonheur de tous les enfants. Ensemble, faisons taire les armes, afin que chaque enfant puisse jouir de ses droits. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Miriam. I think she deserves another round of applause. To have gone through the kind of experience that she has gone through and to have been motivated by that experience, please, let's welcome Her Excellency, the President of Ethiopia, Mrs. Sally Work-Zewde. you very much. You are very much welcome. Our mentor and women leader, Your Excellency, Mrs. Saliwak Zede, the President of Ethiopia. So we are moving to the next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call on Mr. Stephen Miller, the CEO, Save the Children South Africa, who also has an initiative, Stop the War on Children Campaign 2020 report. Mr. Miller, we invite you to the podium. A round of applause.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, President Buhari of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellency, Ms. Saliwak Swede of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Honorable Ministers, Ms. Virginia Gamba, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflicts, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors from the African Union, Ms. Mariam, members of civil society, all protocol observed. Firstly, let me express my gratitude on behalf of Save the Children to the governments of Nigeria, Uganda, and Ethiopia for prioritizing the protection of children against grave violations in conflict on the AU Summit agenda. Without the leadership of the ambassadors of these countries, this high-level dialogue would not have happened. So I believe they deserve a round of applause, please. I would also like to thank the governments of Norway and Sweden for their support to children affected by armed conflict. The number of grave violations against children in conflict has almost tripled over the last few years. From 2014 to 2018, over 55,000 grave violations were committed against children in Africa, including abductions, recruitment by armed groups, killing, maiming, and numerous other forms of abuse and exploitation. In 2016 alone, over 12 million children were out of school because of conflict. The effects of conflict on children are multiple and wide-ranging. It shapes their physical, mental, and psychosocial development. It affects their future, and it affects our future on the continent. I think it's worth remembering that 1 in every 4 children in Africa is living in a conflict zone, and this is stealing their childhoods. But, of course, we have the power to change this through the commitments that we make at this summit. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while it may be impossible to stop conflicts completely, we can take steps to protect children. Child protection is recognized as a critical component of the African peace and security architecture. And this reinforces synergies between the AU Continental Education Strategy, Agenda 2063, and the 2030 Global Agenda for Sustainable Development. Yet, while these policy instruments are commendable, they remain pieces of paper if not implemented and reported on. Therefore, we urge the African Union and member states to help stop war, in line with the Silencing of the Guns campaign. In 2019, Save the Children launched a global campaign to stop the war on children, inspired by our founder, Eglantine Jebb, whose declaration on the rights of the child was the inspiration for the 1989 UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Our campaign seeks to ensure that international norms and standards are upheld, that perpetrators are held to account, that children are protected from harm, and assisted to recover from conflict. Our latest report reveals shocking threats to the safety and well-being of children living in areas of conflict. Since 2014, there's been an increase in 4 of the 6 UN-mandated grave violations against children. and the greatest increase has been the recruitment of children as soldiers, which has more than doubled in Africa. Your Excellencies, it is important to recognize that progress is not only possible, but already taking place. Some countries are taking concrete steps to prevent and address violations. Significant policy progress has been made at the AU level and at country level, especially in the protection of education from attacks and military use. 27 AU member states have endorsed the Safe School Declaration, and several measures have been taken to enhance school security in accordance with the guidelines. This is testament to what is possible and should serve as a call to action to those who influence at the national, regional, and international levels. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as Save the Children, we continue working to help children living in conflict. But of course, we cannot do this alone, which is why we are calling for joint efforts to make a difference for children. Our plea is fourfold. One, that all parties uphold standards of conduct in conflict, hold perpetrators to account, step up investment to prevent the impact on children, and help them to recover from the physical and psychological wounds of war. Two, that more AU member states endorse and implement the Safe School Declaration and devise appropriate reporting mechanisms. Three, that we urgently find meaningful and sustainable ways of ending war in the region and protecting children from all forms of violence. And four, that we reiterate the 30th Ordinary Session Assembly decision inviting the AU Commission Chairperson to expedite the nomination of a special envoy for the protection of children in conflict situations. Our humanity demands that we act, and our future depends on it. If children affected by armed conflict are left behind, we cannot fulfill the promise of Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, nor lay the foundations for a peaceful and prosperous Africa. It is only through concerted and deliberate efforts that we can reverse the current trends and stop the war on children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very insightful presentation that you've made, giving us, or which actually connects the story of Mariam, where you've given us the effects of war and why we need to stop or silence the guns. It is very important, like you rightly said, that we must consolidate by factoring in our humanity, and that demands that we act and march words to action. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, it is my privilege to invite Miss Virginia Gamba, who is the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, for her opening remarks. A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, the Presidents of Nigeria and Ethiopia, and the State Minister for Uganda, Your Excellency Commissioner Akpor, Excellencies, Ministers, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. This high-level event demonstrates the powerful commitment of Africa to protecting its children and the importance of putting children at the core of the ambition to silence the guns in Africa. I want here to reaffirm the commitment of the United Nations, the Secretary General, and my personal commitment to working closely with the African Union to achieve the goal of peace, security, and a brighter future for the children of Africa, including through better protection and prevention against the 6 grave violations children suffer in and by armed conflict. Uganda, Chad, and Sierra Leone are some best practices in these regards. And I really want to also thank today President Buhari for the release of 160 children from detention last year, and also for assisting in engaging in 2,000 children released from recruitment by the Civilian Joint Task Force. Thank you very much, President Buhari. My mandate to protect children from armed conflict and to prevent their abuse has deep roots in Africa. It was created following the Grassa-Machel report of 1996, which identified that the most vulnerable of all children are the children that suffer in war. In conflicts today, boys and girls are exposed to unimaginable violence, mostly because the dynamics of war has changed. The dynamics of the way and the tactics of the way armed groups, particularly engage in armed conflict in Africa, has changed. And at the center of this dynamic and of this tactic are the use and abuse of children. They are the fuel of war at many moments in time. Tens of thousands of children are killed, maimed, conscripted, used, abducted, abused, and often detained. Children are separated from their families and communities and denied an education, healthcare, or life-saving assistance. Violations against children jeopardize the realization of both the Global Sustainable Development Goals and the African Union Agenda 2063, which aim to build peaceful, just, and sustainable societies. Therefore, it is our common responsibility to protect children. I welcome this opportunity to exchange with African states and the African Union to find comprehensive joint solutions for girls and boys affected by war. We must end existing violations against children, we must prevent future violations, and we must provide affected children and their families and their communities with the reintegration support they need and deserve. We also must ensure accountability for perpetrators so that this never happens again. We have some tools for this. I hold 12 Security Council resolutions giving me the opportunity to engage. I also am the Secretariat of the Working Group of the Security Council on Children and Armed Conflict in New York. I hold the General Assembly resolution, and we do advocate for children and armed conflict issues, including monitoring and reporting on the 6 violations, developing joint action plans with the listed parties, and providing technical assistance, including training, to support this completion. But we also do more, and such as, for example, regional and national prevention programs. The African Union today also has a working group on children and armed conflict and has reinforced its children and armed conflict capacity, so we stand ready to cooperate, facilitate, and exchange with them at all times. Prevention efforts are particularly important to ensure that children are not put at risk. The Security Council Resolution 2427 of 2018 put a strong emphasis on the issue of prevention of violations against children, particularly in a regional context. I am already working on a national prevention plan in the Central African Republic and a regional plan together with the International Conference on the Great Lakes on a regional strategy to prevent all violations. But African institutions, regional bodies, and the African Union are the primary tools and engines to assist and ensure this protection, and we stand ready to support them. All states share a responsibility to promote children's rights and put the best interests of the child at the center of their national and global engagements. For this reason, the United Nations has signed joint action plans with governments and non-state actors in Nigeria, Mali, Somalia, DRC, CAR, Sudan, and South Sudan already. The Children and Armed Conflict Joint Task Forces monitor and report, but also assist and prevent violations. We need to do this in complement of all AU efforts and not in competition with them. I will continue to engage with African states as well as with all parties to conflict to support them in ending and preventing violations through action plans. I'm pleased to say I signed in November with the federal government of Somalia a joint action plan to end the recruitment and use of children. And I'm also pleased to say that last Friday I signed in South Sudan in Juba the first ever all-comprehensive 6 violations protection and prevention plan with all parties to the South Sudan conflict. In September 2018, I launched the Global Coalition for the Reintegration of Child Soldiers to encourage long-lasting comprehensive action by fostering new ideas for all children formerly associated with armed forces. Also, in a few days, in fact, on Wednesday, on the 12th of February, I will launch in New York the practical guidance for mediators to protect children in situations of armed conflict. It is crucial that issues affecting children are included in peace processes, as they have been put in the Central African Republic and in South Sudan already. I invite the African Union to adapt and make full use of this guidance in its mediation efforts. In 2019, I launched, in partnership with the African Union and the European Union, the Act to Protect Children campaign to catalyze real change in the lives of children. I encourage all our partners to participate in this campaign. And finally, I welcome the inclusion of child protection advisors in the African Union Secretariat. I strongly recommend the appointment of an AU roving ambassador on child and armed conflict issues. I think that indicators of children and armed conflict violations could be an integral part of the African Union early warning system within the APSA agenda. I think birth registration and age screening mechanisms allow us to fight for and not against our children, and I stand ready to exchange information and best practices such as, for example, the Safe Schools Declaration with you so we can learn from each other. For the children of Africa, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause. Thank you. We have listened to 3 speakers speak, and I'm sure we understand why we are here on this high-level dialogue on children affected by armed conflicts in Africa. We have listened to Miriam. Miriam's story is a grim one. How is it that at that young age, she witnessed her father being killed, and yet she still has this psychological uptake to be able to sit here and discuss it and fight and advocate that we need to silence the guns and violence on children. We have also listened to the effects of violence on children, and we know that they have multiple effects. It is Whitney Houston who sang the song, "I believe our children are our future. We should lead them in the way they ought to grow." Ladies and gentlemen, it's a serious topic because many here are parents, and you can imagine what it is if we are affected by war, how families can be segregated and disenfranchised. So, as we speak and as we listen, and as Ms. Virginia said, that this conference demonstrates the powerful commitment of Africa to save the children and protect the rights of children. As stakeholders and as leaders, if anything, when we leave this room, let's continue that advocacy, not just by speaking, but matching words to action. Having said this, we are going back to start the program, and we're not starting as we're starting all over again, but what we've done, I'm sure, is very, very important. We are going to have our opening remarks by a career diplomat, a lady and a woman after my heart, and many women in this room. She is a role model, she is dynamic, she is intelligent, she is charismatic but humble. Indeed, humility is the gift of leaders, and that is what you represent. Your Excellency, the President of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Mrs. Saleh Works. For me and many whom you are silently mentoring, I take this opportunity to welcome you to the podium now.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your kind words. Your Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, my sister Betty Mugambe sitting for His Excellency President Museveni, Special Envoy, invited guests, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to apologize for coming in late. I had to open another side events. I don't know if you are going to be like the UN General Assembly. We are having many side events going on along our summits. So thank you for accepting that. I would like to thank His Excellency President Buhari, His Excellency President Museveni, the African Union Commission, and Save the Children International for convening this high-level dialogue on children affected by armed conflicts in Africa. As I commend the African Union for selecting the theme of silencing the guns, I would also like to commend the conveners of this dialogue for focusing on the most vulnerable amongst us, who are the most affected by armed conflict, our children. It has been over 20 years since the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1261, adopted unanimously, became the first UN resolution condemning the targeting of children in armed conflict, including the recruitment and use of child soldiers. Despite this resolution, and despite the efforts of African countries, 1/5 of the world's children who live in conflict zones are here in our continent, Africa. This comes as a staggering 152 million African children, 1 of 4 who live in conflict zone. It is heartbreaking to think about 1 in 4 of our sons and daughters growing up in conflict. In the last 20 years, 5 million African children have been killed by conflict-related disease or hunger. According to an Alert 2019 report on conflict, human rights, and peace building, there are presently 14 armed conflicts taking place in Africa out of the 34 globally recorded conflicts in 2018. That comes to 40% of all global conflicts occurring here in Africa, and it is just unacceptable. The time for talking in rooms such as this has passed. Now is the time for action. We have to acknowledge that we have not provided sufficient protection to our children, who are the most vulnerable. As mothers and fathers, there is no greater responsibility than caring for our kids. As leaders of our countries, we must stop the violence, silence the guns, and enable our children to get what they need: food, health care, and education to become productive members of our societies. I would like to recognize all African Union member states who are making progress to silence the guns. As you know, Ethiopia, under the leadership of the recent Nobel Peace Prize winner, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, we have implemented a political reform agenda which includes securing a peace agreement with Eritrea after a conflict followed by a Cold War, which started 20 years ago. This agreement reunited not just two countries, but thousands of families. With more than 900,000 refugees living in Ethiopia, we are home to the second largest refugee population in Africa. This is because we're committed to ensure that Africans from neighboring countries fleeing conflict, especially vulnerable children, have access to continuous sources of food and education in emergency situations. I urge all African Union member states to be unwavering in their commitment to peace. Without peace, our children who survive the conflict are exposed to bodily injuries, sexual violence, trafficking, and there may be the most permanent harm, trauma, the after effects of which may linger for their entire lives. According to Save the Children International, more than 1/3 of all countries involved sexual violence against children. In South Sudan alone, 19,000 children have been recruited to armed groups since December 2013. Persistent conflict and recruitment of child soldiers are also a major concern in Somalia and several countries in the Sahel. During conflicts, schools are often the first to close and the last to reopen. 90% of girls are more likely to go out of school in conflict areas. This has devastating consequences for the rest of their lives, such as being forced into child marriage and early pregnancies that threaten their lives and health for decades to come. The reintegration of all children affected by armed conflict must be prioritized through a comprehensive, coordinated, and child rights-based approach so as to prevent recurring cycles of violence and to build sustainable peace for all children. Reintegration programs of children affected by armed conflicts must include mental health and psychological support, education, as well as vocational training. These programs should also take into account the specific needs of girls and boys, including children with disabilities, so as to enable all children affected by armed conflict to return to their communities and regain their childhood. National and international efforts to hold perpetrators accountable for crimes against children in situations of armed conflict should be enhanced and coordinated. African Union member states should also be encouraged to play a further proactive role in ensuring an international response where national accountability efforts do not work. I also urge African Union member states to further strengthen the protection of children in armed conflict through the ratification and implementation of the United Nations General Assembly optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 2000, the 207 Paris Principles and Guidelines on Children Associated with Armed Forces and Armed Groups, the 2015 Safe School Declaration, and the 2017 Vancouver Principles on Peacekeeping and the Prevention of the Recruitment and Use of Child Soldiers. We are not short of international commitments and conventions. I congratulate the 27 African Union member states who have endorsed the Safe Schools Declaration, which Ethiopia is reviewing, which is in line with the African Union's Agenda 2063. If we fail to reduce the violent conflicts that affect too many of our countries, our children will be irreparably harmed for generation, and sustainable development will definitely not be achieved. However, if we demand peace and hold those who deny peace accountable, our vision for a peaceful and secure Africa can become a reality for us, and even more importantly, our children. The time of talk is past, to my view, and it's time for action. So let's move towards that. With this, I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. You could see the passion in which she spoke with, because she's been an advocate on this for decades. We are very blessed to have had you here. Thank you very, very much. They say experience is better, and that whatever we do in life, we do it for ourselves first before we do it for any other person. And as Her Excellency said, if we fail to abort conflict, our children will be mined from generation to generation. But if our vision for a peaceful Africa has to be realized, then peace must be put in its right place by us working against all the obstacles that stifle peace in our society, so that indeed Africa can be integrated, prosperous, and peaceful. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call on a gentleman who was a former Major General in the Nigerian Army. Your Excellency, as a child in Nigeria, in those days, you can hardly find anybody standing in the public to titrate, or anybody throwing gums or papers outside. Because if you are caught, they will take you to court and you pay a fine, or you spend one day in jail. So that kept everybody morally up. So war against indiscipline is still an aspect that we can use in silencing the gun. And all the speakers here have said something, that we need to bring the perpetrators of war to be accountable for what they do, and they should not just walk away freely. Excellency, what people do not know, because when you see him, just look at the way you are looking at him right now. No nonsense. You will imagine that he does not smile. But what people do not know is that President Muhammadu Buhari is that he has a great sense of humor. He has lovely daughters. That is why it is right for him to be here. And his daughters themselves are active in the civil societies. You need to see him with his children. You need to see him with his grandchildren. So for me, it is not surprising that he is very keen on the welfare of children. Ladies and gentlemen, could you join me as we welcome His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for his opening remarks.
Please sit down. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, and AU Commissioners here present, Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I sufficiently appreciate and recognize the valuable presence of our sister President of the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. I equally acknowledge the strong partnership of the government of Norway and Save the Children's International in supporting this event. Excellencies, let me begin by examining our performance as African Union member states on a continental scale with the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child adopted by the United Nations in 1989 and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which entered into force in 1999. As African Union member states, our obligations relating to the promotion and protection of the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights of the African child are clearly defined in the African Charter. Nothing, the situation of children in armed conflict, noting the situation of children in armed conflict, it is essential for this high-level dialogue today, through its panel and interactive audience, to robustly engage with a view of coming up with clear and actionable policy recommendations for both African governments and the AUC to implement. Excellencies, distinguished participants, we are all aware that the evolving nature of armed conflict, characterized by extreme violence and terror, is posing new threats and challenges for safety of children. The unfortunate phenomena of the recruitment of children as soldiers, and for the millions of them who are out of school, constitute challenges that we have to address promptly and squarely. As parents and leaders, we are deeply concerned that the 6 grave violations against children have continued unabated, especially killing and maiming, sexual violence, unhinged abduction, and blatant attack against schools and hospitals. We are further affected by the actions of warlords in conflict zones across Africa, who make schools desolate and ravage towns and cities. It is for this reason that the Nigerian government has severally condemned and is combating frontally the dreadful activities of terrorist groups like Boko Haram and the so-called Islamic State. Of course, the severity of these grave violations varies from country to country. The incidence of a single grave violation of children's rights in any country is an indelible dent on the African consciousness and is to be deployed and condemned. Given the pervasive impact of conflict on children, the African Union and its member states must step up actions to prevent violence against children in times of war. Nigeria is committed to the protection of children in armed conflict zones. We in Nigeria have taken concrete measures towards tackling the root causes of child soldiering and the misfortune of out-of-school children. First, the National Assembly ratified and domesticated the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in 1991 and 2007, respectively. In 2018, the federal government also made concerted efforts to ensure that the Civilian Joint Task Force, which works in the northeast of Nigeria as a voluntary supporting security mechanism, respects these conventions and operate within the ambit of international law. We worked closely with the Office of the United Nations Special Representative on Children in Armed Conflict in this respect. Furthermore, the Nigerian government established the Independent National Council of Experts on the Rights of the Child to ensure full implementation of these initiatives. We are among the first 13 countries to sign the Safe School Declaration, while we are fully engaged in the Paris Principles and commitments in promoting the protection of children in armed conflict. In line with the Maputo Declaration, we fully respect the ban of recruitment of nationals in the armed forces of Nigeria at the minimum age of 18 and made disobedience a criminal offense. To stand the tide of out-of-school children, Nigeria embarked on an all-inclusive reconstruction of schools vandalized by the ravaging terrorist activities of Boko Haram, while returning children are rehabilitated and reintegrated into the society. Our nomadic education policy is also being implemented to reduce the number of out-of-school children. We have also prioritized de-radicalization and demobilization of ex-combatant children of Boko Haram insurgents. At the continental level, the relevant AU organs and regional economic communities must scale up their delivery in support of member states. In particular, I call on the AU Peace and Security Council to energetically champion the strategy to stop the war on children and adopt the child protection architecture within the African peace and security architecture and the roadmap on silencing the guns. A number of schoolgirls from Chibok and Dafchi, earlier abducted by Boko Haram, have regained their freedom. We commend the gallant efforts of the multinational joint task force and partners in supporting the reintegration of the girls. Let me categorically reassure you of the steadfast commitment of the government of Nigeria to ensure the freedom of all kidnapped children from the shackles of Boko Haram. We will not relent until every child, boy or girl, every Nigerian adult in the custody of Boko Haram is freed. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the call to action is now for accountability by all African states to the rights of children caught up in wars. Let us stop the war on children. This is a wake-up call for us all to create the enabling environment for rooting out the impact of armed conflict against our children across the continent. I wish you all fruitful deliberations and hereby declare this high-level dialogue open. Thank you very much.
round of applause for His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. Indeed, it is a call to action now, and it is a wake-up call to create a conducive environment for all of us. I just want us to do one simple exercise. You make 6 sentences, and then we'll go for the group picture. We have said all this, and we know what violence of war is. Your response is going to be war against violence. When I say something, war against violence, say it from the bottom of your heart. Number 1, recruitment and use by armed groups, war against killing and maiming, war against sexual exploitation, war against attacks on schools and hospitals, war against abduction, denial of humanitarian access. If we do this, Africa will become integrated, prosperous, and peaceful. I want to thank all of you distinguished guests, excellencies, presidents present here, foreign affairs ministers, ministers in their different ranks and portfolios, ambassadors, and our partners and government institutions. Thank you for making it to the opening session of the high-level dialogue on children affected by armed conflict in Africa. Together we are stronger. So we must wage against war against. Can you clap for yourself? Good students. So our photo session, Doris, please help me here. Photo session. The President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Her Excellency Sahle-Work Zewde, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari. Are they taking one by each or together? Okay. Ambassadors are foreign affairs. Yes.